Freedom and the Inconsequential Life. Dear friend, do you value your family, your friendships, your financial security, the roof over your head? Of course you do. These are among the things we all hold as most important. Could there be anything more valuable? Yes, actually there could. It's the one thing that without which all of these other things can be taken away from you in the blink of an eye. That thing is freedom. Now I realize there's a big difference between freedom and liberty, that they are not synonymous. Please see the end of this piece for an explanation. But for now, I shall use the word freedom as all-encompassing. Without freedom, ultimately, there is nothing. Just ask the 100 million people who had it taken away from them during the course of the 1900s alone, when they were first disarmed and then murdered by their own governments. Over the centuries, more humans have died at the hands of their own government than from all diseases and natural causes combined. The reason being that these people were not free, while their governments were free to do anything they pleased. For a brief refresher on freedom, I suggest you view the final scenes of the movie Braveheart. To quote the immortal Thomas Paine, "Freedom had been hunted round the globe, reason was considered as rebellion, and the slavery of fear had made men afraid to think. But such is the irresistible nature of truth, that all it asks and all it wants is the liberty of appearing." Unquote. Truth be told, freedom remains a rare commodity indeed, so rare in fact as still to be largely non-existent today. In fact, I can't think of a single nation on this entire planet where the people living there are free. But this isn't a recent development. Over the past 5,500 years of recorded history, small cadres of individuals, lords, chieftains, dictators, emperors, pharaohs, monarchs, the list goes on, have systematically denied freedom to those whom they controlled, mostly through brute force. Libertarian philosophers prefer the term coercion, but force it is nonetheless, force that compels loyalty and tribute from a population whom its rulers claim to love and serve. Two definitions are in order here. Coercion begins when you elect certain people to meet in a special place. We call these people government. These special people write words on paper that specifies things you absolutely must do, like file a tax return, vaccinate your children, get drafted into the military, as well as things you absolutely must not do, like drive too fast, tell a terrorist joke at the airport, or carry a firearm in public. If you fail to do any of the things which they say you must do, or if you do any of the things which they say you must not do, their minions may just fine you and let you off easy. But if you really fail to behave, bad citizen, scary people with guns and badges are sent to arrest you or just take your stuff. Today's rulers have come a long way in their ruler management skills. If you really want to lord it over your people and keep them in their place, you don't ride into town on a chariot brandishing a sword. That's too obvious. You ride into town in a battle-hardened presidential limousine, with flags flying and fighter jets overhead for air cover, wearing a suit and tie, and protected by a motorcade full of very serious people with automatic weapons. Of course, this isn't the slant on history that one receives during a government-sponsored education in the public schools. But with rare exception, every civilization ever recorded has been centrally managed under various flavors of coercion, from simple tribal rule to centrally planned tribute and plunder. Which leads to our second definition, tribute, which is a lot like taxation, but without the legal requirement. This is where you pay taxes because government-certified experts say you have to. Except neither you nor they have ever read the actual law. So you keep paying taxes anyway, in which case, well, you're paying tribute. Understanding freedom is really easy. You're either free or you're not. If you're not free, you're in a condition of servitude. As with pregnancy, there can be no in-between. Servitude comes in two flavors, voluntary and involuntary. We all know about involuntary servitude. If another person or assemblage of persons can coerce you to do their bidding in a manner that violates both natural law and your liberties, you are in a condition of involuntary servitude. We call this slavery. Voluntary servitude, on the other hand, is a force of a different color. For example, you might think you're free to apply for a marriage license, never stopping to realize that if obtaining permission to do so were actually required, there would be no application process nor any form to apply on. but you signed the application anyway of your own free will, thereby converting a natural right into a privilege. And yet you still feel free, since now you can marry anyone you like with the governor's permission. To illustrate how easy a concept this is to understand, simply point out to any bright 10-year-old that a dog on a leash that is clipped to a wire strung between two trees is free to move back and forth. But is it free? Citizens realize they're not free when they see the leash. In the movie The Truman Show, Truman Burbank finally saw his leash, and he promptly left town. If 100 million citizens were to wake up tomorrow morning and realize this, I have no doubt they would march on Washington, D.C., brandishing torches and pitchforks, or maybe cell phones and TV remotes, and straighten things right out. The problem is the TV never mentions that you're not free. If you were not free, surely your TV would let you know. But it doesn't, and so you are free, and life goes on. To quote Thomas Jefferson, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and will never be." Unquote. Etienne de la Boétie tackled this issue in the year 1548 in his classic libertarian screed titled Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, when he asked, and I quote, "For the present, I should like merely to understand how it happens that so many men, so many villages, so many cities, so many nations, sometimes suffer under a single tyrant who has no other power than the power they give him, who is able to harm them only to the extent to which they have the willingness to bear with him. O good Lord, what strange phenomenon is this? What name shall we give to it? What is the nature of this misfortune? What is this national vice that permits loss of independence? What vice is it, or rather what degradation? To see an endless multitude of people not merely obeying, but driven to servility, not ruled, but tyrannized over." Unquote. Tell it like it is, Steve. Governments today can seize your assets and jail you for refusal to pay taxes that you may or may not even owe. Your compliance? Involuntary. This was equally true of peasant farmers living under Egyptian pharaohs. Government today can seize your family home for failure to pay the rental fee for the privilege of living on state land. We call this property tax. But wait a minute, if the mortgage has already been paid off and you now hold title, isn't this your land? Well, apparently not. And your compliance in paying this rental fee? Involuntary. This was equally true of peasant sharecroppers in medieval times, which today we call the Dark Ages. Government today can conscript your children to be sent to foreign lands to do the bidding of a globalist elite who foment and fund wars to advance their agendas. Your compliance? Involuntary. This was equally true in ancient Rome. Every slave throughout history yearned to be free, to rebel and burst their chains. Can you think of any sane individual today who, when given the alternative of freedom, would willingly choose to be a slave? Compared to what you were taught in high school civics class, if we think of Congress as a collection of individuals with the power to force their views and agendas on everyone else, even when in defiance of natural law and in violation of the Constitution, can it be said that those made subject to the resulting legislation are free, or are they in a condition of involuntary servitude? The easiest way to deal with this dilemma is called cognitive dissonance. Just ignore the problem. Appease your lords and masters. Fund their schemes with your tribute payments. Send your children to their schools to be indoctrinated from their books. Enable their wars of plunder and conquest by serving in their militaries. So, is it possible to be living in an ostensibly free country and at the same time be in a condition of voluntary servitude? Absolutely. I call this slavery light. Goes down easy and 50% less thrilling. Let's see what Samuel Adams had to say. This is the firebrand who almost single-handedly ignited the revolution that set America free from the yoke of British monarchical control and whose contributions are scarcely even mentioned in the public schools. To quote Sam, "If ye love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that ye were our countrymen." Unquote. Tell it like it is, Sam. In a letter dated February 26, 1800, Thomas Jefferson wrote the following to Samuel Adams in recognition of his contribution to the cause of liberty. Quote, "A letter from you, my respectable friend, after 23 years of separation, has given me a pleasure I cannot express. It recalls to my mind the anxious days we then passed in struggling for the cause of mankind. Your principles have been tested in the crucible of time and have come out pure. You have proved that it was monarchy and not merely British monarchy you opposed." Unquote. Moving from the subject of freedom, I must now ask, is it possible to live an inconsequential life? By inconsequential, I mean to say the relative impact of your life on the freedom of future civilization. Now, please don't misunderstand. Every life is valuable. How could any human life be of no consequence? You're a good person. You perform valuable work. You help others, tell the truth, play fair, and are loved and respected by many. But each of us will pass from this mortal plane and leave this world behind, just another drop in the great river of humanity. We need to ask ourselves, how will my life have contributed to the timeless quest for human freedom? Or will my coming and going have been largely of inconsequential value to the generations to come? Is there more to existence than raising a family, material gain, a comfortable retirement, a nice home, marble countertops, an annual pilgrimage to Disney and 200 channels? For even slaves can live well. Next week, we'll look at some of the little everyday things we can all do to promote the cause of freedom without having black Suburbans show up at our front door. Until then, this has been Gordon Phillips. May your tribute be put to the best possible use and your every nickel appreciated.